Hey guys, this is Illusion PODFIC, and today we're going to be reading Revived Publicly by Orphan Account. This is Chapter 2. Jason paused before the steps of the company, looking around cautiously. Already they were setting up for the press conference that was supposed to start in 2 hours. The absence of reporters surprised him more than he'd let on, but it was a surprise that he welcomed. He didn't know if he could deal with questions right now. Not when he was already this tense. Surely Bruce wouldn't appreciate him threatening to hit a reporter. Again. He almost wished someone would provoke him just to annoy his father. A new smile made its way onto his lips when he realized that he was quite literally there to answer questions. Out of the corner of his eye, he could see a girl turn to her friend and point at him. Real subtle. Rolling his eyes, Jason stepped forward, walking up the steps until he was pushing through the unnecessarily extravagant glass doors, and stood before the security. "Welcome to Wine Enterprise." She trailed off. The bright, frankly unnerving smile fell off her face as she recognized who he was. Maybe it was just his grim expression that depressed her. "Mr. Todd, right?" she asked, her voice as perky as before. It was the former then. "Right," he answered, wearing the same overly excited smile that she wore. He must not have done it with enough sarcasm, as she barely phased by it. He caught his reflection in the shiny wall before her, and it was enough to permanently knock the smile from his lips. Fuck, he looked stupid, dressed up as he was. Bruce had been the one to insist he come in his suit, and then he insisted that Jason buy a better one when he realized his $60 mall formal wear wasn't designer. Apparently, he couldn't be seen wearing the same suit twice in a row either. "Here you go," the woman, still in an awfully cheery tone, said as she handed him an ID card before she stood up. Jason pinned it to his pocket, frowning when it didn't connect immediately. He would definitely complain about this later to Bruce. "Mr. Wayne asked me to personally escort you to his office," she said and paused, as if waiting for Jason to express his excitement that his father cared to have him escorted. If anything, he would give him an earful about the babysitter. "Thank you," he answered instead, considering it practice for the no doubt endless and irritating press conference that he was about to attend. "Right this way." He followed her without another word, resisting the urge to roll his eyes when her back was turned, and the bounce in her step matched her perky personality. What was the point if no one was there to see and be annoyed by it? She led him to the elevator, swiping her card at the console before holding the door for Jason. He stepped in beside her, making sure to stand a little behind her. Maybe it was his vigilante training, probably was just hope that she'd catch a hint and wouldn't try for small talk. Disappointment wasn't anything new to him. "It really was so exciting to hear about your return to Gotham," she began, an interested twinkle in her eye, and Jason clasped his hands in front of him, if only so he'd have something else to do. "And it was in such a dramatic manner, too. I mean, how many years has it been since your death? 5? Jason hummed in agreement, looking away to instead analyze the painting hanging on the wall. What kind of dick hung paintings in an elevator? What was it like, away from Gotham and your family? She finally seemed to have gathered the courage to ask. How, Jason would always be astounded. I mean, after his overly enthusiastic answer to her first question, clearly this was something he wanted to discuss. "What did you do to fill your time?" God, she spoke as though it were a vacation. "I guess you'll have to wait for the press release later like everyone else," Jason joked, trying to keep his tone good-natured. There would be 2 more hours of this later, he thought to himself with a grimace. If possible at all, which Jason hadn't thought before, her smile seemed to sharpen. "I know we were all so terribly sorry to hear about your death," she said with such fake pity in her tone that Jason almost laughed. Instead, he gave a solemn nod. "We were absolutely devastated here at Wayne Enterprise. Mr. Wayne didn't come into work for, I think, a week." Jason stiffened at that. The bright smile she still wore only made what she had said even more insincere. "Personally, I would have thought that he would need longer to mourn a child, but you know him better than I do, I suppose." She finished with an awkward laugh, and Jason dug his nails into his palms. Be nice, be nice, be nice. He wasn't sure whether that was Bruce's or Dick's voice in his head, but someone was warning him. "Yes, I'm quite aware of how my father handled my death," he settled for speaking in an icy tone. It wasn't outright hostile, but it wasn't what his brother or father would have wanted. For a second, he swore he saw the secretary's smile falter. He didn't have it in himself to feel guilty. She remained quiet for the rest of the elevator ride, only clearing her throat when they reached the right floor and the door slid open. Between having to host a press conference and cooperate with Bruce, his mood had been shed already. He hadn't thought it would be possible to worsen it, yet all it took was one obnoxious secretary. As tense as he was, there was no way that Bruce and him wouldn't get into one of their screaming matches today. Jason followed her silently out of the elevator, eyeing the glass offices warily. He had never understood the appeal of working in full sight of other people, letting them see his every move and watch when he slacked off. He let his gaze drift from office to office, keeping a neutral expression when associates looked back at him. Unlike him, they didn't hide their amazement at seeing Jason Todd, Bruce Wayne's adopted son, return from the grave. Finally, Jason read a familiar name. Mr. Tim Drake. Read the name on the door, and when he looked through the door, he saw his brother typing away at a desk with a furrowed brow. Yeah, this would be a lot better than immediately having to see Bruce. You know what? Jason said, successfully stopping the nice secretary in her tracks. She turned around, an expecting expression on her face. You can just leave me here. I'll find my own way to my father later. He plastered the sweetest smile he could muster on his face as he was already stepping towards Tim's door. Her expression crumpled to one of uncertainty. But Mr. Wayne specifically said, and I'll make sure to tell him that you were a lovely guide, but I wanted to stop in with my brother. Jason cut her off. Already his hand was pushing down on the door handle. She opened her mouth as if to speak, and Jason quickly tightened his smile. Pressing down on the handle, stepped back into the room and closed the door. He turned around to face Tim, continuing to stand stiffly by the door. Tim's hands had paused his typing, instead hovering over his keyboard as he stared at Jason with a confused expression. Aren't you supposed to meet with Bruce? He asked, his hand already going back to the keyboard, no doubt pulling up a digital calendar with every single one of Jason's appointments this month. Or some other nerd shit. Yeah, whatever. Is she gone? Jason asked, his eyes flickering to the side instead of pointing the secretary out with his head. Who? Miss Sunshine. Jason lovingly nicknamed her, pleased with himself when Tim cracked a smile. The secretary? He asked, holding back a laugh. Poorly, albeit. Jason gave a frantic nod, and Tim made a show of craning his neck to look around his brother. She left immediately after you came in, probably to complain to someone about her boss's son being a dick. Jason only snorted at that. He turned around, not that he didn't trust Tim's judgment, but rather he wanted to see for himself. He took 2 more steps, then he dropped backwards onto the sleek leather couch with a loud sigh of relief. Letting his legs hang over the edge, simply not having to put his weight on his feet in the new and deeply uncomfortable shoes was a great relief. He shifted his shoulders for a few seconds, trying to be more comfortable, which was rather hard when the couch was just trying to be uncomfortable. What's the point of having an office with a couch and all that nice shit if it's just uncomfortable to lie on? He complained, sneaking a glance at the side, where Tim was again looking at a screen. His brother briefly met his gaze, and Jason looked back at the ceiling. That's part of the trade secret. When we invite business partners over here, they find it so uncomfortable here that they want to make a deal as quickly as possible just so they can leave. Tim answered, dropping his voice to a stage whisper. Jason widened his eyes comically. Well, it's not much of a secret anymore if I know, is it? You have to promise not to tell anyone. Tim responded with a serious nod. He pressed some keys in a fast sequence, and seconds later the printer in the corner spurred to life with a quiet whir. Nah, I'm selling new secrets on the internet, Jason retorted, resisting the urge to stick his tongue out. That did earn him a suppressed snort from Tim, and Jason was almost hit with a swell of appreciation at how normal this seemed. Just him and Tim, joking around, like brothers. It was far off from when he tried to kill the other. That's your statement, if you want to go over it before you, state it. Tim informed him, ever eloquently, and gave a nod towards the printer. Then he was back to clicking away at his screen. Only a trained and practiced vigilante like Jason, or just anybody who had spent time with Tim, could see that the younger brother was still watching Jason out of the corner of his eye. Jason jumped up. It didn't take more than 3 steps total to get the paper from the printer to flop down in the chair across from Tim's desk. He masked his smile when the chair rolled a little further from the impact. Then he began reading. When he was done, Tim had quit trying to pretend he was working and instead was watching him with crossed arms. And? He asked quietly, almost unsurely. Jason hummed softly. It wasn't perfect, but he doubted even he would be able to do it perfectly himself. Besides, he had been given the opportunity to write a statement himself and passed on it. You wrote this? Jason asked, just for the confirmation. Tim nodded, his expression poorly, trying to hide his nervousness. "It's good," Jason said, swallowing heavily. The way the tension bled out of Tim's shoulders relieved him as much as his brother. "I'm not sure about the whole my family moved on without me thing." He tried to keep the emotion out of his tone. Judging by Tim's expression, he wasn't entirely successful. "I thought it might be easier to just stick to the truth and the overall timeline and just correct certain things that have to do with vigilantism," Tim explained slowly. It was a difficult subject for the both of them after all. Memories of Jason, still enraged by pit madness trying to kill Tim, would never leave either of them. He supposed it was better that they stick to the truth, but in this case that wasn't exactly the problem. It was too much of it. It had hurt Jason to come back after years of being dead only to find out his family had moved on without him. He wasn't sure if he was ready to share that. "I can make changes if you want. I mean, we still have 1.5 hours. Tim offered, reaching for the page in Jason's hand. He hesitated briefly. "It's fine," he finally decided, after reading the statement again. Admitting that he wanted it crossed from the statement would be admitting that it had hurt him, and he couldn't do that. "You know you were supposed to meet Bruce, not me, right? He wanted to talk to you first, and then go over your statement together," Tim reminded him, and Jason threw his head back with a sigh, eyes trained on the ceiling again. "I know. Why do you think I came here?" Jason asked, irritation in his tone. The last thing he wanted was another one of Bruce's talks about family and the importance of public image. "It's not because I enjoy your company," he added as a last resort, because he couldn't very well let Tim think he liked him. "Okay, brother," Tim said, emphasizing the word sharply, and Jason let out a huff of laughter. "Do you think you can text him that I'm running late? Just half an hour or something?" Jason asked, kicking his feet up to lie on Tim's desk. As tense as he was, he doubted Bruce yelling at him would make him feel better. "Get your shoes off my desk." Jason did have to marvel at his reflexes. He rewarded him with the middle finger. Tim glanced at him briefly before frowning. "And as for Bruce," he motioned towards the door, and Jason followed his eyes until he saw his father opening the door. "Fuck." He quickly turned around to share an annoyed look with Tim. "Ah, Bruce," Tim said with a mischievous smile that made Jason want to hit him. "Jason wanted me to let you know that he's running late. About half an hour?" Scratch that. Jason was going to hit him, just as soon as the stupid press conference was over. The glance that he sent his brother must have been downright foul for Tim to look somewhat guilty. "Jason," he heard Bruce behind him, and he was already mentally gearing up for a fight. "Present," he answered, waving an arm up as he went back to studying the statement in front of him, trying to commit it to memory as quickly as he could, anything to avoid having to speak with his father. "Cherry was supposed to bring you to my office 20 minutes ago," Bruce said. His hand came to rest on the edge of Jason's chair, and he had resisted the urge to flinch away. It took Jason an awfully long time to realize that Cherry was probably the over-enthusiastic secretary. "Yeah, well, Cherry turned out to be kind of a bitch. So I ditched her to spend some quality bonding time with my favorite brother," Jason answered, letting sarcasm bleed into his tone. When Tim raised an eyebrow at him, he sent his best imitation of Cherry's fake smile. He could almost imagine the conflicted expression on Bruce's face. On one hand, Jason had childishly disobeyed him. On the other, he was actively seeking out Tim's company, rather than trying to kill him. Jason almost wished that he had turned around to face Bruce, or that Tim had a mirror in which he could see his father's expression. "I'll text Dick and let him know," Tim interrupted, trying to dissolve some of the tension in the room. Jason only shook his head. "You'll break the poor guy's heart," he warned, pity in his tone. "Did you finish the statement, Tim?" Bruce asked, instead of criticizing Jason further. In a more rough than necessary motion, he pushed Jason's legs off the desk, making him yelp in surprise before pulling up a chair beside Jason's. "Rude," Jason muttered as Tim smirked at him. He held out the statement he'd been staring at since Bruce had entered the room in a peace offering. His father took it wordlessly, instead quickly reading through it. Jason let himself slump forward in his chair, knowing that if nothing else worked, at least his shitty posture would infuriate his father. He watched him carefully as he read, pinpointing the exact millisecond that Bruce's expression switched to one of hurt, before it was carefully hidden once more. "Are you dead set on saying that Jason felt replaced by you, and that he felt the family had moved on?" Bruce asked, the question clearly directed at Tim, and Jason rolled his eyes. Tim may have written it, but it was his statement still. Yeah, I think Timmy really outdid himself with that one, Jason praised, shooting Tim an overzealous smile. He wanted to keep as close to the truth as possible. There was a brief flicker of hurt again, and I couldn't agree more. I think it really adds a level of vulnerability to the statement that the press would be displeased with otherwise. Bruce only frowned, but stayed silent otherwise. Why was that particular detail so painful for him? It's not as though he were the one replaced. I'm only worried about the image it creates of our family. Ah, of course. There it was. As per usual, Bruce wasn't concerned with Jason's feelings, but rather his own public image. It did make Bruce appear like kind of a shit dad. If Jason hadn't been unsure in the beginning, he was completely convinced now. Your public image will be fine, Jason interrupted, snatching this statement out of Bruce's hand and before his father could respond. Besides, I like it. He ignored Tim's puzzled expression. I don't want to risk the public pitting you two against one another, which will no doubt happen if we give them reason to, Bruce explained further, his forehead wrinkling in that way it did whenever he's concerned. Jason so rarely saw it directed at him anymore that he almost paused his antics. That'll happen anyway, doesn't matter what I say or don't, and it's my statement at the end of the day. If I want to say it, I'll say it. Jason retorted with a shrug, hiding from his father's no doubt angry expression by reading through the statement for the nth time. Even if he wasn't looking, he could tell Tim and Bruce exchanging a look with one another. The kind of look his family frequently exchanged with one another when they thought he wasn't looking. The kind of look that meant, watch out, or back off. It was the kind of look that meant they thought he was about to snap. Jason hated it. If he'd been in a bad mood before, now it was positively tanked. There were a few seconds of tense silence, and Jason couldn't help but think to himself that this was the exact reason why he had chosen to come to Tim and not Bruce. Then Bruce exhaled deeply and turned to face him. How are you feeling about the conference? Bruce finally asked, and he sounded as weary as Jason felt. Or maybe it was wary. He wasn't entirely sure. Fine, he responded, not looking up from the statement, which he was reading for probably the 16th time now. A sigh sounded next to him. Jason resisted the urge to roll his eyes, lest it give him a headache. I wanted to meet with you before looking at the statement, to see if I could give you some last-minute pointers. Bruce began slowly, carefully. Jason hated when his family started walking on eggshells around him. At the same time, he loved the power this gave him. Bruce was scared that he was about to do something stupid, and that was a great feeling. Pfft, it's not like it's difficult, Jason interrupted. Quiet typing briefly interrupted his train of thought as he glanced to the side to see an uncomfortable Tim continuing his work. He actually did feel a bit of guilt for the first time that day. Probably that week, if you're being honest. I just smile a lot, do a lot of enunciating, leave dramatic pauses and room for laughter, and pretend as though I didn't try to kill Timbers over there, and my father didn't try to kill me. He ended with a perfect final touch, an overly cheerful smile. Really, with how often he's used it today as a punchline, Jason should really be thanking Cherry. His father's expression darkened immediately, and Jason couldn't help the twinge of satisfaction he felt. If he had to be miserable, then so did Bruce. Oh, relax. I'll be fine. He groaned when Bruce looked down as though he wanted to lecture him again. When I fuck up this conference, it'll be an accident, not on purpose. Surprisingly, the grim expression on Bruce's face wasn't lifted. It better not be. Bruce spoke in a deep tone that sounded more like Batman than Bruce Wayne. A clear threat if Jason's ever heard one. Better not be an accident? Or what? You'll try to kill me again? Both remarks died on his tongue. This seemed like the wrong time to push his father further. Although a part of him, the deepest, darkest, that enjoyed tormenting others, did wonder how far he, as Jason Todd, could push his father, Bruce Wayne. They were in an open office building, glass walls and doors surrounding every office. He was untouchable. The thought made him smile. He never thought he'd feel safer as Jason Todd than as Red Hood. You can pick me up from Tim when it's time. Jason nodded toward his brother when he mentioned him, and instead reemerged himself in his statement. He didn't bother reading it this time. He just wanted an excuse to ignore his father. Bruce stood with a nod, his hand hesitating near Jason's shoulder, and Jason braced himself for the impact. It never came. Soon enough, he heard receding footsteps and the door closing. He didn't know whether he'd mourned that the touch never came, or was grateful for it. Jason let out a deep sigh, settling the statement back on the desk and resting his head in his hands. Tim mimicked him. Well, that was uncomfortable, his brother finally said, and Jason snorted. Understatement of the year, he responded, his tone empty of amusement. He looked up briefly, seeing Tim's unsure expression, and added a quiet, more serious, I'm sorry. He even meant it this time. You know he's trying, Tim said, his tone not even attempting to joke anymore. It was in a small voice, as though Tim expected to get yelled at for saying it, and judging from Jason's past reactions, it wasn't an unfair expectation. I know, Jason whispered. So am I. Are you? Tim surprised him by questioning him. Jason couldn't help but feel taken aback by it. Luckily for him, it remained a rhetorical question as Jason received a text, and Tim went back to working on whatever it was he did. From Dickhead. What do you mean I'm not your favorite brother? Frowny face. Alright guys, and that is the end of Chapter 2 of Revived Publicly by Orphan Account. I hope you guys liked it, and I'll see you next chapter.